Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Brew Hoop podcast. I'm your host, co-managing editor of brewhoop.com, Adam Paris. We've got regular season game, folks, and I'm excited to talk about some real basketball for once. And most importantly, I have two of my favorite colleagues with me from brewhoop.com, Kyle Carr and Riley Feldman. Guys, I've installed my climate-controlled seat. It's set to a very, very comfortable 37 degrees Celsius to ensure that my back is ready for this entire hour or hour, however long of podcasting. How are you fellas doing?
I am happy to be back. I'm gone for one episode, and you guys let Mitchell declare that John Henson's going to be the most improved player in the league.
We tried to stop. We tried to stop him.
And I appreciate that, but I'm back to bring things back into alignment, so I am happy to be back once again.
And things are good. The hype train is going pretty well. Can't complain. It's a nice little breeze that I'm getting conducting it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it has to be like you probably don't even have to use fossil fuels at this point yet. It's like just running on wind.
Yeah, it's pretty much just all wind, maybe a couple leaves, but that's it.
A couple leaves. So resourceful, conductor Kyle. All right, well let's get into the meat of it here. So we finally have some actual Bucks basketball to talk about after the excitement of this preseason, where we got plenty of Pat Connaughton minutes, but I'm sad to say we haven't seen as many of Patty C going out there and shooting triples. But what we do have is a 3-0 Bucks team that won their initial game against the Charlotte Hornets 113-112, eked that one out. Pretty convincing win over the Pacers then to follow that one up 118-101. And then, of course, Monday night they downed the New York Knickerbockers after a valiant comeback by David Fizdale's club, and the Bucks won out 124-113 with a number of sweet shots down the stretch and Eric Bledsoe screaming his face off as they made clutch plays. So we have a 3-0 Bucks team. We have a team that looks markedly different from what they were like last year. We have a team that is engendering, I would say, an incredible amount of hype for Kyle's train in the regular media. I feel like there's a considerable groundswell for the Bucks to go much further than they have in years past. And the team is playing basically like how we wanted them to play for the past couple of years. They're shooting an incredible amount of threes. Raw in terms of three-point attempt rate, they're ranked 4th per Basketball Reference. The raw stats, they're 3rd in the league at 40 per game, shooting 40% on those threes, which is 7th in league. I mean, this is almost like a shooting utopia that we've landed in here with the Bucks, where they've almost eliminated mid-range stuff. So Riley, what are your initial reactions now that you're back? You've had a couple weeks to let this all sink in. What are your initial reactions to these first couple Bucks games?
I would say, especially on the offensive end, the thing that's so different is that it's just pure fun to watch the team. Like you said, we've been kind of waiting on this for a while, and now that Bud is here, it's kind of in full effect. I think I saw earlier today from StatMuse something like the highest number of 3-point makes over, per game over a season. Bucks history was like 8.8, and so far they've got 16 3-point makes per game so far this season. So, I'm not sure if that'll hold up, but that's, more than doubling the amount of threes that they're making over any sort of franchise record. And it's sometimes a little bit frustrating because now we're dealing with 3-point shooting where it's a lot more streaky, but when they're on, it is so much fun watching the opposing team, edge up, grind to get within 4 points. And then, the Bucks will shoot and make 4 threes, and the game will be back out to like a 15-point lead. Whereas in the past, we were always the team on the receiving end of that, and it was the most frustrating thing in the world. So far, it's just been a lot of fun, and you can't do too much in the way of deep dive analysis of like the stats and everything, but I think it's all trending, positively across the board, especially on the offensive end.
Kyle, hype conductor that you are, how have you just felt after these first couple games of I would say basketball bliss compared to past years?
I definitely am happy with just the overall positivity that's been emanating from Bucks Twitter. Yes, they have complained when the Bucks have seen their leads against Charlotte and New York kind of dwindle. And most of that is because those teams have had heroic efforts from their guards just not being able to miss. And if that's the only thing people are going to complain about, I'm okay with that, to be honest. But yeah, just kind of like what Riley was saying, it just looks fun, especially when the threes are hitting. Like last night when Chris Middleton just hit 3 in a row, I was unable to keep up with the tweets just because as soon as I tweeted one, it was like, oh, he hit another one. Okay, get that one ready. And then he hit a third one. It's like, holy crap. And it's just fun when that happens. And you can kind of see it with the other players. It's like they seem like they're actually enjoying the basketball that they're playing. And with that, they've also had good contributions from players. Bledsoe has looked fantastic this season. Middleton is shooting threes that we all liked. Ersan and Brook Lopez have been great signings. Dante looks to be a solid pick. There are definitely some things that I wish could be, better, like a little bit more Sterling Brown, Tony Snell trying to be a little bit more consistent. John Henson just deciding to shoot the ball instead of, passing it up, despite Saturday's effort where you hit 2 threes and the building Fiserv Forum might have collapsed if he had hit a third one. But overall, I'm happy with it. And I think there's a lot of things that people should be excited for with the season.
Yeah, we are living in a post John Henson buzzer beating 3-pointer world. That is remarkable. That is an outrageous statement that I cannot imagine having said at all for the past several years. The Bucks, the interesting thing that I think seems most acute to me, and we can touch on this later with our discussion of Giannis, since I actually think he might still be, and we talked about this a little bit in the preseason as well, as Giannis finding his way within Bud's offense, and she's such a unique player. But it feels like everyone is slotted into a very specific part of Bud's system that he came in here to try and implement. It's just so clear what everyone is supposed to be doing, where they're supposed to be going. It felt like in years past there was a bit of befuddlement, or it might lead to, when there clearly wasn't enough of a system or whatever, it just led to isolations on one side. Clearing went out and just hoping that Chris Middleton would be able to create something, or hoping that Giannis might be able to make some ridiculous drive to the hoop. But this year, it's so clear where everyone is supposed to be. You have your centers running to the corners. You have Eric Bledsoe understanding that he's supposed to be sort of a facilitator, be able to make drives when it's possible. And his passing seems significantly better this year, with people in places that are actually useful for them to help space the floor and create driving lanes. Riley, it feels like everyone knows what their role is supposed to be. And I think that's helped bear itself out with some of this low-hanging fruit, like just shooting threes and eliminating the mid-range shots and isolation stuff that was our scourge of the past under Jason Kidd.
Yeah, and a lot of it was just small adjustments, and the key will be, how are they being the players able to keep up and maintain those small adjustments? Because we've seen it in each of the 3 games, though more notably in the Charlotte and the Knick game, where they come out after halftime and, like years of old, they were really slow rolling into the third quarter. The like kind of hints of isolation ball showed just for a second or two, and it wasn't exactly the most pretty basketball. So there's still the possibility that these guys have old habits that they have to break. But you're right that a lot of it seems like, whether it was Coach Bud or, any other competent coach who would have come in, seen what the pretty obvious issues are, done the slight adjustments, and then this could be kind of the product. And I think we need to credit as well, whether it be Bud or Horst, with the Brook Lopez and the Ersan signings, where how quickly, and the Pat Connaughton signings and other things as well, but how quickly this team went from this plodding, antiquated machine of last year, and then over the course of one offseason, with generally smaller moves, they've been able to craft a modern offense that moves everything into the right places and takes advantage of, the math and the kind of zeitgeist that's dominating the NBA right now. So I think it's just like this perfect storm. But the thing that we have to keep in mind is a lot of the pieces were still kind of already there, and it was really small adjustments. And that's what makes it more exciting, because as they continue to get used to those and make more adjustments, what kind of team are they going to turn into by the end of the year or the years coming?
Yeah, I think thinking about this team's offensive ceiling is really entertaining. Watching Chris Middleton be willing to go for pull-up threes has been one of my favorite parts of these first couple of games this year. And Kyle, another big improvement so far, and it's incredibly small sample sizes, so we're not going to go crazy on it, but I know you've been looking into it, is the Bucks are significantly better so far on the glass. And if you look at total rebounds, which is kind of a BS stat a little bit because it's just all dependent. It's dependent on pace. It doesn't really integrate any of those kind of things in there. The Bucks lead the league in total rebounds, but if you look at defensive rebounding rate, the Bucks are 9th. Offensive rebounding rate, the Bucks are 5th. In each of those respective categories last year, they were 30th and 26th. And so this wasn't really something that we were expecting. I mean, I would say even in the early going, because Bud's teams really didn't have a history of having strong defensive rebounding rates at all, Kyle.
Right. And I think it's one of those things where part of it is the personnel. You get someone like Brook Lopez, who, statistically has always been someone that he might himself not get a lot of rebounds, but he's boxed out his guys to allow other players to get rebounds. So that's a big first step. And then you have a guy like Ersan Ilyasova, who, I mean, he's tipping everything. He's tipping it to himself. He's tipping it on the offensive end to go for basket. So you have those two players in the lineup to replace Thon Maker, Jabari Parker, guys that really, in Don's case, can't catch the ball. Jabari is, we're not going to go there. So you kind of have those two factors, and you kind of look, and Giannis is just skying up in the air and grabbing rebounds. Dante DiVincenzo, for his size, just going in, grabbing an offensive board and drawing a foul. And I think it's also helping that with their shot profile that they're allowing other teams to shoot. Because last year the Bucks defense would allow, a lot of shots at the rim and 3-pointers, while this year they're allowing more mid-rangers. So of course, if they're going to keep missing those mid-rangers, it's going to be easier for them to rebound it because they're not completely spaced out. So it's definitely something that I want to look more into, but it's encouraging signs. I think just having that personnel of Lopez and Ilyasova has been a huge boost, and it just seems like defensively they seem to have since it's more conservative, they're not running all over the place and can't find a guy to box out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the more important points. That was something that was, I think, oft debated among a lot of NBA intelligentsia, is if these kind of aggressive helter-skelter schemes, which sometimes occasionally had success. I mean, there definitely was a track record, but had some success with it defensively in Atlanta. If that just meant you were going to be completely sacrificing your ability to defensively rebound, and Bucks clearly so far have dialed back their scheme significantly from last year, obviously. And box out Brook seems to be doing obviously the kind of thing that he's been doing throughout his entire career. And the same thing that Robin Lopez seemed to be doing in Chicago and the same thing that it helps John Henson as well. If you're dropping back as a big, as opposed to having to help all the way up around the arc, it's just a lot easier to be able to find a man to put your body on, to position people closer to the basket, position guys like Giannis so they're in a better position to grab rebounds, as opposed to having to run around and maybe someone missed an assignment. So then it's Giannis just trying to scramble back and contest at the 3-point line, and then he just ends up out of bounds, as opposed to at the rim where he's able to sky. And after as of Tuesday night, Giannis was leading the league in raw rebounds per game. That's crazy. So I think this is going to be one of the more interesting ongoing developments to see if this sticks in any way at all, or if this is just sort of a early season anomaly and that kind of stuff. Is there anything else that has been really exciting and interesting about the offense or defense that's been standing out to you, Riley?
I think two things that I kind of noted, and again, this is only 3 games in, so this could change as the year goes on, but I like the minute load per game so far for Chris and Giannis. So Giannis last year, he averaged 36.7, the year before 35.6, and the year before 35.3. So far through 3 games, he's only averaged 34.7 minutes a night. Now that also can be kind of chalked up to his foul trouble. We can talk about that. But then for Chris as well, he's only averaging 32.7 versus 36.4 and 36.1 and his year from injury where it kind of dipped. But we've been so used to seeing those two guys ridden for long sections of games and, throughout the entire season to help, claw this team towards any semblance of ability to win. So far, the fact that they've been able to drop that a little bit, and we'll see how that kind of progresses throughout the year. That's been interesting. And then the second thing that I've noticed is how lean the rotation is. So far, there's only been 9 guys who have played in all 3 games and had 14 or more minutes played per game. And the 4 guys, I believe, who didn't get on that list are Christian Wood, Delly, Pat Connaughton, and Sterling Brown. And that's compared to last season, where for that same parameter, 16 total guys made that, groupings. That's over a whole game day roster. And that's including the likes of RIP, DeAndre Liggins, et cetera. But I'd say those two things, minor and worth keeping an eye on to see, how do injuries impact that? How much more are we going to have to rely on Giannis, or maybe how much less are we going to have to rely on him and Chris to be able to do things? So I think those are two things that are kind of interesting to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially against the Knicks, the Bucks had extended their lead in the second quarter with Giannis sitting on the bench. Now, granted, a good chunk of that was Chris going supernova and hitting 3 threes in a row. But I mean, last year when Giannis would sit on the bench, that the Bucks would just completely fall apart, unable to do anything offensively or defensively. And so far, it looks like they've at least been able to hold serve. They're not, leaking points. They're not getting completely ran off the court. And that's something that's going to be really good, because that way you can allow Giannis to actually get a breather for a little bit longer and not have to play him, 8 straight minutes or something.
Yeah, I think it's hard to overstate just how much having actual either net neutral or positive players, in the cases I would say Brook and Ersan at this point, to be able to come off the bench or just fill some of those minutes that were there. I mean, last year you think Thon Maker's getting a decent amount of minutes, and for the entire year he was basically a net negative player. I mean, the Bucks have had a lot of those guys lately who are just filling up the fringes at the end. Jason Terry didn't have a good year last year. I mean, and they've basically replaced those guys and supplemented them. DJ Wilson didn't get many minutes, but he would have basically in any minutes he came in garbage time, he wasn't very good either. And so they've supplemented them with players who know what they're doing, have played in Bud's system before, or understand the facets of it, and are applying a positive effect on this Bucks team. And I think one guy who is getting plenty of minutes, if we know, probably at the expense of someone like Sterling Brown, is Dante DiVincenzo. And Dante DiVincenzo is actually like a very fascinating player to watch. And so as the Bucks are moving on, and they seem to be getting a little more professional with how they carry their business and pull these wins out, we're going to do the same thing here on the Brew Hoop Podcast. We're going to introduce a segment we like to call On Like Dante Kong.
Wah, wah, wah.
It might be a working title.
You guys liked it earlier, so that's cool. You turned on me now. So
I just wanted you to say that with that voice.
Yeah, that's really cool, guys. I think it's interesting to highlight how Dante fits in, because I mean, in the entire preseason, basically he couldn't make a shot. He's managed to hit some come the regular season now, but he does stuff. He does stuff. That's like the best way to describe it, is he actually does stuff, as opposed to guys like Rashad Vaughn and DJ Wilson, who basically seemed invisible on the court. And let's see, I think we can go around here, but the first thing I'd like to highlight is Dante. There was a possession in the Indiana game where the Bucks defense was a little off kilter. Dante was guarding a guy in the corner, and I forget if it was Victor Oladipo or someone else who was on the wing, but the ball was passed to hit to the guy at Pacer on the wing. He was completely wide open. Dante DiVincenzo helped over just enough, got his hand kind of in the way to distract him enough that the guy felt that he might come over to contest, caused him to basically give the ball up and sort of glitch the possession, and then Dante helped back to his guy in the corner. And it just seemed like the type of actual cerebral defensive play that I wouldn't expect from a rookie. Granted, he's a little older, but that was something that stood out to me. What about you, Kyle?
I think for me, it was when he went in, skied in for an offensive rebound, and was still able to draw a foul. And especially just for someone his size, he's not really someone that I would expect to, even win that rebound, let alone get it, protect the ball, and draw a foul. So I think for me, that was one of the things that really stood out to me, just because it was one of the things that everyone knew he had this athleticism, where he had this vertical and he had this ability, but we didn't know to what extent it was going to go to. So to see him just come out of nowhere and grab that board, I think that was for me one of the things that stood out. And also, I would love to go with the Why Dante segment, but I know that doesn't go over well with some of our readers. So we're just going to have to work on that. So
it's a season-long project, that one. To make the people understand. No, I would say in terms of Dante, what I've been most impressed by, and this is probably more indicative of my biases of him as a prospect / when we drafted, because I mean, obviously I hated it. I'm on record. I hated the pick when it happened, but
same here.
I think what I assumed was this is first off, guy who got hot in the NCAA tournament. Now I'm going to go ahead and try and give benefit of the doubt to the front office that wasn't a major deciding factor. Maybe it helped, but I kind of thought, 6-man gunner type, and I didn't expect him to be able to flash a lot of, other skills, and he's not like fantastic at them, but I've been impressed with his ability to, play make a little bit. He's been solid enough, with ball control, and then also finding guys in the pick and roll. Him and John Henson seem to have trying to build some sort of chemistry. A lot of his passes are maybe a little too spicy and a little off target for John when he's rolling to the basket, but he's found a lot of creative ways to get his teammates the ball in open spots. And that's something I, wasn't fully expecting. And then like Kyle said, the rebounding it's not crazy, but he's serviceable. And then finally, also on the defensive end, and this is something we saw in the first game against Charlotte, is that he's been subbed in specific defensive sets, which is, both high praise and unexpected for the fact that this rookie in his first regular season game, he's getting thrown in at a very critical moment at the end of the game for defensive help. And he's been pretty solid running through screens, kind of switching like you were just talking about, Adam, as well. So I think it's just reassuring 3 games in, and there's still stuff for him to work out. But the fact that he's been able to show a whole bunch of different things, and he hasn't been thrown off by the spotlight per se, or the fact that he's playing in his first NBA games, that's reassuring for, at least the medium term for, what Dante could turn into.
All right. Well, that's been the first iteration of that segment. Apologies for the horrible name / pronunciation. We'll work on it. But I think what I want to touch on is you started talking about defense there, and Dante DiVincenzo being able to work around screens, particularly in this Bucks offense. I mean, they had him guarding Victor Oladipo at points the other night for gosh darn sake. And what I want to touch on first is this revamped Bucks offense. So I'll just give you guys a few different statistics. I think we all can see like a marked difference from last year. So particularly in the pick and roll, definitely go and read Eric Name's piece on The Athletic. If you have that, it's an excellent piece about Eric Bledsoe guarding the pick and roll, Bucks revamped defense, and this idea of rear contests. So Bledsoe coming from behind the picks to try and get blocks and that kind of stuff. But so the Bucks are 5th in opponent free throw attempts per field goal attempt, they were 29th last year, which is sort of one of those tenets that Bud wanted to talk about, which is, not fouling as much. And then in particular as well, that's another one of those low hanging fruit things that we've talked about, where it's just like a small tweak here and there, and just a little more discipline on the team that can pay huge dividends. The more interesting one to me is the opponents are attempting the 7th least 3-pointers per 100 possessions. That's per Basketball Reference against Milwaukee, which is 27.6. And then importantly, they're actually very small sample size, but the Bucks are allowing the least corner 3 attempts in the league, which was actually a huge issue with Bud's defense in Atlanta. They allowed, I believe it was the most right corner 3s in the league last year. That's been sort of a bugaboo for them for a while, but the Bucks have only allowed literally 2.4 corner 3 attempts per game so far this season. And I expect that to potentially change. That's definitely way too small of a sample size to expect forever, but that's been interesting to me. And then they have allowed the 3rd most mid-range jumpers in the league, which is basically what we're seeing this defense be designed to do. So they've allowed 20.7 mid-range jumpers per game. And so, Kyle, what are just your first impressions of what this Bucks offense is designed to do and how you think they're doing in it so far?
I think right now they're at least designed so that they're not allowing teams to just fire off 3s at will, which is, again, odd because of Budenholzer's system last year. But it seems like a lot of the teams they've gone against, though, are players that kind of look for that like shoot off the dribble, mid-range, like Kemba Walker, Victor Oladipo, Trey Burke, Tim Hardaway, guys that are going to pretty much take any shots off the dribble that they can. So that is something that I noticed, but it just seems it doesn't seem like I have to sit here and be like, how is that guy wide open? Why is this always happening? Can they not get anyone to stop? And I know at times they do get a little bit caught off guard with the, I guess like Kemba pulling up from 3 off a pick and roll. It's been a tough thing to guard. Trey Burke, I know last night he was getting to the hoop pretty easily, but it just seems like it's more, with it being more conservative, I don't have to kind of have that, oh crap, that guy's wide open and you can see it a mile away kind of thing. So it's going to be something that I don't know if that's going to continue but especially with the corner threes. But it is a positive sign that even if they are going against guys that will pull up off the dribble, they're containing it to the best of their ability. And the more mid range that teams fire up, the better.
Yeah, one of the things that with that aggressive scheme that they were running, one of the thoughts was that you're going to be able to get a lot more turnovers that way. You turn that into easy buckets with this Bucks defense. But by the end, when the Bucks were allowing so many 3-pointers and so many shots in the paint, it's like at this point you've pretty much tipped the scale far too much in one direction to be able to recover enough in the other end. You'd have to have an outrageous number of turnovers per game, outrageous number of turnovers converted into points, and that just wasn't the case for the Bucks. So I think this defensive scheme, at least to start out this year, is a far superior way to approach it. What have you thought of it so far, Riley?
Well, I just kind of echoing your guys' thoughts. The fact that it's systemically worked so well that each of the three opponents have kind of fallen into the same trap over and over and over again. And, to their credit, it was, I believe, in ranking, it's the 11th best, 18th best, and 15th best offenses by offensive rating so far this season. And this is whatever, recording on Tuesday night, but, kind of middle of the pack offenses. And the fact that for one reason or another, they all kind of were like, okay, we'll take the mid-range shot. And that might be something that, we'll have to see how effective is that when you have teams who aren't going to fall into that trap, who are a lot more kind of like mirroring the Bucks, where they're like, okay, well, if you're going to give us the mid-range shot, then we're going to have to, how will they respond schematically to take that zone away and force the Bucks to adjust? So I think there's still a lot of questions. I've just been impressed with the fact that it's worked for 3 games in a row. And at the same time, we have to keep in mind that they eked it out in 2 games. And they let Mario Hezonja eat them alive yesterday, which was infuriating. And so there's still, it's not, a perfect machine. And there's been a couple of times where, they've tried like a really high up the court trap. And then all of a sudden, whoever the ball handler is for the other team gets it out. And then we're back to, days of old where the team is scrambling to try and catch up from shooter to shooter as the ball moves across the court. So I still think there are some aspects of last year's defense, and this might be something we kind of expected with the fact that Bud kind of ran a similar-ish scheme. But I think defense is one of those things, even harder than offense, to kind of get a feel for 3 games through. And I think we'll learn a lot more, this week, or next week, I should say, against Boston and Toronto, and then during the West Coast road trip. But so far, I'd say it's pretty promising across the board.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me is there seems to be such a high point of emphasis on the point of attack defense, which isn't always the case. Like, you can sometimes get away with hiding your point guard and those kind of things. And when the Bucks were, had their big man out who was aggressively hedging and trying to allow the point guard to recover and that kind of stuff, it wasn't as big of a deal. But there's a huge emphasis on Eric Bledsoe, on Malcolm Brogdon, on Dante DiVincenzo being able to get around that initial pick. And you could see, Indiana was going to pick after pick after pick to try and get Victor Oladipo free. It worked for Charlotte when Kemba Walker was able to even just get a sliver of space. And I'd expect teams to, as teams, some point guards try and dribble into the mid-range, and we clearly allow those shots. I expect some teams to maybe move that action up in the half court and set those screens up a little higher, especially for a guy like Kemba, and then he's able to get those kind of shots and force the Bucks to try and see if Brook Lopez and John Henson are willing to come out even just a little bit further, and then that could short circuit the Bucks defense a little further. But I think at this point you have to be heartened by the fact that even if you almost always, like, every defense is basically going to try and give up some type of shot or be giving up some type of specific points. I mean, the hypothesis behind Jason Kidd's defense and Sean Sweeney's defense was basically that they're not going to allow like any shots, which is clearly backfired in their face. But this one, obviously, Budenholzer has made it purposefully try to allow other teams to take what is considered the least efficient shots in the game. And if that's what they're going to be working with, at least for the time being, I'm 100% happy with that. Kyle, what do you think about if Eric Bledsoe, Dante DiVincenzo, Malcolm Brogdon, do you think those kind of guys can hold up with that, basically having to exert that type of effort the entire year defensively?
I think Eric Bledsoe can, just because he's a seasoned veteran. He's still very athletic and quick. So I think he might be able to. Brogdon, I feel like it depends on who the other guard is. You know, if it's going against Kemba or Damian Lillard or John Wall, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned than if it's someone like Ricky Rubio or Reggie Jackson, you know, guys that aren't really as quick with the ball in their hand. Dante, I'm curious because as much as I love Dante, I know there's going to be a rookie wall. I know at some point he's going to probably not be as efficient and as effective. So he's going to be someone that it depends on how he handles the rookie wall. I think that's going to be something to look out for. So I think those three guys overall, they'll be able to hold their own. And I mean, like I said, against a Kemba or Lillard, John Wall, Westbrook, Curry, you just have to hope for the best with those guys. But, you know, with some of the other point guards in the league, they should be able to manage and come out better.
Go ahead, Riley.
I was going to say, one guy that I would be kind of concerned about, and this is a season-long trend, is Giannis on that end. And that's more so a function of the fact that he's working so damn hard to get every point and every call on the other end. So how much is that going to drain him? And, you know, to his credit, he's 23 going on 24. He's in the best shape of his life, et cetera, et cetera. But over an 82-game season and into the playoffs, how much energy is he going to be expending on the offensive end to continue his output there, which is pretty critical to the way that the offense actually works? And how does that translate to his effort or his ability to kind of keep up on the defensive end? It hasn't felt like so far through the first 3 games that he's been, you know, targeted or anything. And there's been a couple of times where he'll get angry at, you know, whatever, getting stuffed and smacked and slapped on the other end. And then he'll go out of his way to sky for a block or something along those lines on the defensive end. But I just think it'll be interesting to see. Yes, the guards might be able to hold up within the style, but is Giannis going to be able to give 100% effort? And how critical is he going to be at the end of tight games with the defensive scheme the way it is?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think so far, I think Eric Bledsoe will hold up. I mean, I think his slightly less frenetic offensive output so far seems to indicate that he might be willing to be sacrificing a little bit of that kind of stuff on that end, going up for crazy finishes at the rim and instead trying to pass it out to an open guy and then use some of that energy that he's saving on the defensive end. Dante DiVincenzo seems pretty good at slipping around screens. I wonder if Malcolm Brogdon will be able to hold up. I think you're right, Kyle, in saying that. Obviously, I don't think it's necessarily right for us to expect him to hold up against the upper echelon guys of the league. I mean, Eric Bledsoe couldn't even do that against Kemba Walker, but I think him being a little more slow-footed, I'm curious. Hopefully, his wingspan will allow him to get to those kind of rear contests and let him keep up with people. But he's the guy, I guess, at this point, I might be a little bit more concerned about. So I think we've touched a lot on the defense so far, and we talked a ton at the beginning about how the offense seems to be flowing at significantly higher levels. But Riley, you mentioned this earlier, but because the Bucks seem to be relying so much on 3-point attempts, there's just sort of a different feel to this offense. It's, you know, last year we would definitely get in points where the Bucks were stuck in a rut. They might not be scoring. 2 years ago you had a guy like Michael Beasley and you were like, oh wow, it's actually pretty convenient we have this guy because we don't have anyone who's willing to create right now. And the Bucks still sort of fell into offensive ruts last year as well. But this year they're definitely of a different making. They still seem to be getting good shots and working within the system, but their 3-point attempts just sometimes don't fall. And that's allowed teams to come back like the Knicks did just Monday night. So what do you think about this sort of ebb and flow nature of this new Milwaukee Bucks offense?
I'm not too concerned about it. I would say it's something that you just we're going to have to adjust to, that other fan bases might have already have with their offenses a lot more 3-point heavy. I think a lot of people who are a lot smarter about basketball than I am would say that it's not so much, how do they put it? It's more so how many attempts are you getting up and kind of the come and go nature of the shooting itself. That's just kind of expected. So I'm not overly concerned about it. It makes nightly viewing a lot more stressful because instead of consistently blowing teams out by 20, you let them kind of climb back in as you go cold for a stretch. And one thing that I would say that the only thing regarding 3-point shooting and its emphasis that concerns me is the number of possessions where Brook Lopez walks up and he's still 40 feet out from the basket and he just, 10 seconds into the shot clock jacks up a 3. I guess it's not all on him. There's other people like Chris. He was on fire last night, but he would just kind of walk up and just jack a 3 too. So I'd say I have some concerns, not so much with them being streaky because that's going to come and go, but how are they getting those 3-point shots? Are they actually, with ball movement and driving and kicking, which is a lot of effort, or are they walking up in a half court set, 5 seconds of the shot clock, pass it to Brook Lopez, who then, shoots a 3 and maybe it goes in, maybe it doesn't. So that would be the one concern, but I'm not too worried about it being, we're suddenly going to have 2 months where the team is hitting 10% of their 3-point shots. So I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, you think about that and you contrast that with the past couple of years where I was totally fine when Mirza Teletovic might be trailing and he'd get a shot, 4 or 5 seconds into the shot clock from the top of the arc, just because the Bucks were shooting so few threes. And honestly, that was probably a pretty dang good look considering the Bucks offense back then. But now when you think about the level of looks that Milwaukee's able to get, you're right. It feels like when you're doing a shot that early in the shot clock by a guy who's maybe not Chris Middleton or Tony Snell or that kind of stuff, it does feel like a bit of a sacrifice and isn't necessarily the kind of shots that you'd be looking for. Kyle, what do you think about this revamped offense and how it's, it definitely goes up and down, but I mean, for the most part, it's far more optimized than what we've had in years past.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I kind of wonder if it was in reverse, in which the Bucks always started not being able to hit shots, and then it gets to the third quarter and they're just on fire. And maybe I'm kind of curious to see how that would affect the mindset. Otherwise, I mean, a lot of the shots, especially in the Knicks game, they were wide open threes and they were good looks, and they were, not like 5 seconds into the shot clock. They were maybe like 10, 15. So you're working your offense enough you got a good look with a good shooter, whether it was Ersan or Brogdon, Middleton, Lopez, guys that are pretty good shooters, and they have a good look. It's just not going in. And, when it happens once to twice to 3 times, and it's like, okay, a little bit concerning, but I think it's just one of those that I think we'll still have to adjust to. If they go 1 for 13 in the quarter, yeah, it's not great, but there's going to be mean regression. They're going to, maybe not go 10 of 13, but they'll go like 6 of 13, 7 of 13. So it's just something that will have to be, I think that's something we'll have to adjust to. Is just understand that there's going to be a regression of the mean, both in favor of the Bucks and against the Bucks. But the other thing that's kind of slowed down their offense is they really turn the ball over a lot in the third quarter, it seems like. And maybe it's just being worsened by the fact that they can't score, then the other team's going on their runs during that quarter. But it seems like the turnovers have increased in the third. And I know during the Charlotte game, it was because Charlotte went with the super small lineup that gave the Bucks fits. And another chunk is Giannis, kind of bulldozing his way through players and getting offensive fouls and traveling. So I think it's going to be the turnovers that are going to be more something we have to look at, because if the turnovers can be cut down, then I think those open looks, they get more of those open looks, they go to the basket, or Giannis gets those baskets right at the rim.
If I could just follow up real quick on the Giannis point, I'd say Giannis so far this season is kind of a double-edged sword, but I think over the course of the year, the concerns about the fact that 3-point shooting teams can be streaky, as evidenced by, teams in the playoffs like Houston in the last year's playoffs, can be offset by the fact that we have a player like Giannis who is, obviously head and shoulders above pretty much every player in the NBA, especially when it comes to his ability to attack the basket, where you're not scheming or you're not gearing totally up towards everything has to come through the 3. If it's not dropping through the 3, you're pretty much screwed. In this case, throughout the year, you'll be able to go to Giannis, and so far this season, he's really had to work to be able to make it happen, but he's still posting stupid, crazy numbers. So I think the concerns are even lessened even more because you have Giannis who's able to give them a different look if everybody's getting dragged up, which is the beauty of the fact that we wanted all this space around Giannis. So I think that's just something we have to keep in the back of our mind that will probably come into effect more so as the year goes on.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. And obviously, coming into this year, teams would be certainly trying to divert almost all of their attention onto Giannis. And he's been trying to force his way under the basket. And we've seen that played out with his significantly higher turnover numbers this year. We've seen him clearly get frustrated when he's not getting foul calls. So I'll be really interested. So, for example, we're watching this Bucks offense, and they're seem to be kind of stalling out at points. And I mean, it's a weird reality when I'm watching this Knicks game. The third quarter is not going Milwaukee's way. The Knicks are making a ton of mid-range jumpers. The Bucks offense seems kind of like it's not necessarily working. The players seem to be kind of frustrated with the fact that the 3-point shots aren't going in. They're still shooting them, but you can kind of tell that there's a lot of frustration that sets in. And then like it's weird that I saw John Henson like get the ball at the top of the arc, and he had a ton of Enes Kanter gave him an absolutely ridiculous amount of space. And I would say, realistically, even if this isn't amazing, I would be like, well, if the Bucks were like feeling like their offense was flowing and they're hitting threes, I bet John Henson just shoots that shot. That's probably what Bud would want him to do. But instead he passes to Giannis. Giannis tries to do this crowded penetration, misses a finger roll as he's trying to get in there. So I'll be curious about how the players react when they get into those sort of fits and starts, because I know for us personally, if it's an adjustment for us to try and get used to the fact that we have this significantly more mathematically optimized offense, it has to be different as well for these Bucks players when they're thinking, okay, these shots aren't going in. Are we going to keep doing them? Are we going to keep continuing this momentum? What kind of ailments should we try to do? Are we going to force it trying to go to the rim? Is Eric Bledsoe going to be doing that kind of stuff? So
I think that's on the Tough Shot Express.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's going to be an interesting point to watch, especially with the Marquee 3, if that sort of persists throughout the year or not. Yeah. So, all right. Well, anything else early season takeaways from you guys before we move into a little bit of a preview for what's to come?
I will mentioned earlier that the turnovers. So per NBA.com, the percentages of the turnover so far this year is 17%, which is not good. Hopefully that can be cut down. Like I said, Giannis being able to not run people over and draw a lot of offensive fouls and traveling would be a good start. Bledsoe still kind of does that thing where he like gets to the lane, goes up in the air, and like kind of realizes he doesn't have a shot, so he like try and contorts his body and throws a pass. So it's not happening as frequently, but it's still a thing. So I think that's going to be something that I think turnovers, if they can reduce that, is going to A, help their offense, and B, not make the stagnation as an issue.
Right.
I'm gonna close with one positive, one negative. One positive, if we're gonna have the Dante segment, we need to have the John Henson Most Improved Player campaign segment.
Oh.
So yeah, shout out to Mitchell. So far through 3 games, is per 36 stats, obviously with a huge grain of salt, but he's posting 5.9 points, 16.6 rebounds, with 5.5 of them being offensive rebounds, 4.2 blocks. He's got a 19.1 PER and has a 3-point attempt rate of 29.4%. And I just wrote next to that, LOL. So we'll just have that every week. And then the negative, I would say, and we kind of expected it going into the year, but the fact that Thon and DJ and most painfully for me as Sterling Brown's my adopted son, they haven't really gotten any burn at all, and I'm going to assume that's because they aren't as good as everybody else on the team, and that's a little depressing. So that was kind of expected, but to see it kind of actually in reality is a sobering thought. But if we're scoring and beating teams consistently throughout the year, I guess I'll forget about it for the moment.
I wonder if that's actually going to be true. I have some curiosities about Bud's particular system and how the season is going to go. And I think this is a question we talked about beforehand, is how much is Bud going to focus on like playing the veterans so far and going for these wins. And obviously we've seen Dante plenty. So that's been kind of curtailing that thought a bit. And I think pushing it a little bit to the background. But I mean, if he wasn't playing that much and let's say Pat Connaughton's playing in his place, it's almost like, okay, well, you pretty much just like gone all in on this kind of group of free agent people that Horst brought in. So I think that's something we should revisit when we have a little bit larger sample size from what Bud's hoping to get out of the system. So
plus with Don being injured, that didn't help him.
Yeah, that's true.
Season.
Yeah.
He's probably quote tweeting himself though right now as we speak. So people look out for that. He's probably quoting himself.
It is cool that John Henson has taken the mantle from Thon for guy that gets a cheer whenever he shoots a 3. It's really, really weird.
It's the most 2018 thing of 2018.
Okay, let's talk about the week ahead, because the Bucks actually have a pretty good test here within the next 5 games. Sans, I guess the Magic. I don't know what to do with the Magic. But starting tonight against the Philadelphia 76ers, they're going to have a good test. It's going to be at home in the Fiserv Forum, so that's good. Bucks struggled with the Sixers last year. I saw them personally, the Sixers personally smack the Bucks out here in Philadelphia, which was tough. But the interesting thing about the 76ers is that we were talking a lot about point of attack emphasis defensively. But the Sixers run the last year they were the least in terms of frequency running pick and roll in the league. So it's likely we won't see those types of point of attack defense be as much of a huge thing. They're doing a lot of dribble handoffs, so they're doing a lot of less specific pick and roll action up at the top. So it'll be guys kind of trying to work around those handoffs and having to run around the court and stick with their guys. So it'll be interesting to see whether they lapse back into sort of the helter skelter poor habits that they had in years past. So any terms of what you're looking for in that game against the Sixers, Riley?
Nothing too crazy. I think the advantage will kind of be in the Bucks' favor, especially since Ben Simmons is a coward and won't take threes, and Markelle Fultz looks to be completely, or at least near broken so far. So that's two of their stars. Embiid is obviously a handful, but I'm just curious to see. I think they have like the 9th best defense so far this year. So just to see, as we hit, wait, is it in Philadelphia or is it in Milwaukee?
It's in Milwaukee.
Okay, well, never mind then. So, I guess just as we face better defenses, and if we do start running into issues with, opposing teams who have the type of talent or the, roster makeup to give us issues, how do we respond to that? So I expect us to win because that would be, Pfizer Forum, national TV. It's the Sixers. Everybody hates the Sixers. Come on. So I'm looking forward to it, but I think just more so a better defense. What does that mean for Milwaukee's offense, especially if we go cold, et cetera, like that?
Moving on to Friday, then the Bucks face off against the Timberwolves. We saw them smack some Jimmy Butler-less T-Wolves in the preseason. To me, Jimmy Butler seems like the kind of guy who would want to exploit this defense incredibly. I mean, the T-Wolves seem to like those kind of mid-range shots. They also have Derrick Rose. So these seems like exactly the kind of guys who will be an interesting test to see whether the gambit pays off. Kyle, what are you looking for in this T-Wolves game?
For the T-Wolves game, I mean, we kind of talked about this is a team that actually likes to take mid-rangers. They have players that would favor it in Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins, and Derrick Rose. I'm curious to see how Karl-Anthony Towns will do because I think he's going to be the one guy that gives Milwaukee the most problems, but he's not even getting shots on his own team. I think last I saw, he was like 5th in usage, 5th in shots attempted, which is really, really bad considering he's their most talented player. So I think that's going to be something to look forward to. I still expect Milwaukee to overall win that game as they are a better team. They have a better coach, and Minnesota still has its weird drama with Jimmy Butler and if he is or isn't going to get traded, and he's still lambasting Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins while also giving Tyus Jones a lot of praise. So the Timberwolves are a weird team. I think they're like the team that, that's a game where if Minnesota hits 60-70% of their mid-range, then the Bucks might be in trouble. But overall, I'm not too concerned as long as they're not giving Karl-Anthony Towns the ball.
Plus, Kyle and I are going to be in the stands, so they have to win it for us. I've watched them lose so many times and be so obnoxious in the stands and get served crow. So they got to do it for me and Kyle.
All right. I think they've only won once since I've gone to games and watch in Minnesota. So hopefully it changes.
Perfect. Yeah, guys, you definitely go. It seems like you guys have a good track record. Okay, so they face the Magic. Magic on Saturday. I just don't. Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to talk about that one in depth. It's what Mo Bamba, Jeff Hammond, Jeff Weltman, a lot of Jeffs, John Horst, Hammond, a lot of John Hammond. Sorry, John Hammond, a lot of J names. Sorry, isn't Jeff Hammond the actor who played the guy in Jurassic Park? I think he is.
He is now.
Okay, yeah. All right. Yeah, Jeff Hammond's the guy who played the owner of Jurassic Park. Wish he was there. He would be kind of fun. All right. So, hey, speaking of dinosaurs, the Bucks face Toronto Raptors on Monday.
Look at that high quality segue there.
Wow.
Yep. And then, okay, so I'm actually very intrigued for that game. So obviously Nick Nurse took over after Coach of the Year Dwayne Casey was ousted, and they have Kawhi Leonard, an incredibly switchable defense with Pascal Siakam, Serge Ibaka. Fred VanVleet gets after it. So I'm actually really curious to see how the Bucks offense looks against a defense of that caliber. And Philadelphia will also give a pretty interesting similar test. So Riley, what do you think the Bucks offense, how do you think they'll respond to a team that's able to sort of match up with their level of length and ball movement?
I think, and we've kind of been talking about this. I know we had the roundtable go up as well, but I think this one would be one where they might have, significant issues insofar as we're still early enough in the season where, like we've talked about throughout the podcast here, the team falls back on bad habits on occasion, especially if things aren't falling. So I would say if that's doubled up by the fact that you're facing a defense that also is in your face the entire time and makes your 3-point shots difficult and kind of stalls the offense, is Bud and company, are they able to kind of push through and keep the offense going the way that they want it to? Or is it still early enough in the season where things are still kind of clicking into place where it's, so stifling that at least for this first game against the Raptors, the Bucks just don't have it offensively. So I think I don't have high expectations going into that game, but that'll be the thing that'll kind of look out. Whereas it looks like the other teams that we faced and will face, there's at least a chance that even with issues, we should be competent enough to keep the offense kind of going. How does that happen if you really get stalled?
Yeah, and Bucks have always seemed to historically have some issues against the Raptors, and of course, we were talking about point guards who could potentially exploit that point of attack defense. I think Kyle Lowry is definitely in that group. Another guy who's in that group would be Kyrie Irving, and the Bucks plays Boston next Thursday. Kyle, Boston's been a weird team so far. It seems like the chemistry is a little off. They're trying to work Gordon Hayward back into it, work Kyrie back into it after that playoff run they had last year. What are you expecting the Bucks to do in this rematch of their playoff series last year?
That's going to be interesting because Hayward doesn't look like he's 100% back, and I don't even know if he looks okay, but he's hasn't looked great. Jaylen Brown has looked pretty bad, which is shocking. Kyrie Irving's had a couple games where he just hasn't shot the ball well. It seems to be, Jason Tatum and Al Horford being really the only guys that are still consistently doing a good job. It's going to be weird because, Boston just lost to the Orlando Magic. And I know a lot of that was because their shots weren't falling, but it's going to be interesting to see how Boston responds. Because I think if there's a time for the Bucks to attack them, now would be the best time. I don't know how much switching Boston's going to do because I know they did a lot against Philly, but I still like the Bucks' chances, but Boston's a weird team at the moment because it seems like not all of their key pieces are 100% or playing well.
Let's all keep in mind the fact that they have the worst offense in the entire league through 3 games. And I am done hearing about Brad Stevens this, Brad Stevens that. I'm done with it. Until they get out of 30th place, I'm done with it.
That's a great call. Let's ignore small sample size there. You're right, Riley. Okay, let's make predictions for these wins, and we're going to keep track of these as the pod goes on this year, so then we can all decide who's going to reign supreme at the end. And we might not even pick actually all the games, but I'm going to keep track of the ones we pick now. So, Kyle, what do you think the Bucks will go in these 5 games we just detailed?
Well, Ben Simmons isn't playing tonight against Detroit, so that's going to be really interesting to see if he's going to be ready to go tomorrow. Even if he was playing, I was going to say they're going to go 4-1. I think Toronto is the only game that I don't feel super confident in because Toronto has looked really good. But yeah, especially with no Ben Simmons, I'd say 4-1 easily.
You like 4 easily? Wow. Okay, Riley, what about you?
I'm going 5-0. I don't care about
oh my God.
I'm just saying. Here's the thing. Okay, you survive 3, difficult games. In theory, you learn from that, and you go off and you kick some teeth in. I'm ready for it. Maybe this hot start's for real. They haven't gone 3-0 since 2005, so I'm going to keep it going 5-0 for the next 5 games.
All right, you hype Riley. Wow, you take a couple weeks off and you get all excited. I'm thinking 3-2. I think they're going to win the next 3 games. It's going to reach a fever pitch at that 6-0 mark, and then we're going to be brought back down to earth with a couple of losses against the 2 of the people who are probably going to be the top teams in the East. So I'm going to be the Debbie Downer to end it out, but I feel like I think it's just all that I really care about at this point is just sort of testing a little bit of the mettle of this team, testing the process of this team. And I think so far the process is bearing out with wins. But more importantly, the process seems to be a really successful formula. And that's why I was even fine with the Bucks sort of giving up their lead last night. And I think it allowed the starters to get some good minutes working together in Bud's offense down the stretch. And they had to pull out the win as opposed to just stopping a team like that, I think that'll pay dividends when they get into games that actually matter down the stretch and in the playoffs, rather than them just bowling over teams. So I'm in on the 3-2 mark, and I think that'd be totally fine. Sorry, Riley.
No, it's fine. It's whatever. You're a hater. It's all good.
I thought I was being bold with 4-1.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for this entry that we have. We'll have a lot more data and games to go off for the next Brew Hoop podcast. So make sure you check out brewhoop.com. Make sure you follow each of these guys on Twitter. Kyle, what's your Twitter handle again?
My Twitter handle is @KyleCoche.
And Riley?
I'm at Riley Feldman. That's with 2 N's on the end.
And I'm at Adam R. Paris on Twitter. Make sure you mostly follow @BrewHoop on Twitter. Kyle's the thumbs behind that. Hilarious stuff. You might even get some, maybe you'll even get some action shots of Kyle and Riley together at this.
There will be a Periscope show. I don't know if it's going to be pregame or postgame or halftime, but be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. Also make sure, always watch Kyle's Periscope shows. They're always entertaining. Very good. Great stuff.
I've toned down the Kool-Aid so far. I've been needing to binge 5 of them at once.
Isn't this the time to be drinking the Kool-Aid?
Ooh.
But
I'm so sorry.
Right,
so
on that
sorry,
note,
listeners.
on that note,
And on that note, please review and subscribe.
Yeah, please review and subscribe. Maybe even leave us a rating. You can call me out for my bad jokes. That's fine. If you leave a review, though, I'll appreciate it. I'll even read the bashing that you have for me on air. But most importantly, go to brewhoop.com as well. Check out everything that we've got going on over there. A ton of game coverage coming up. A ton of other pieces intermittently stretched between there. Kyle's working on a rebounding piece. Andrew, new addition to the site, is doing some great game recap stuff, working on an Eric Bledsoe piece. So stay tuned to brewhoop.com for all of our coverage, and we'll talk to you next time.